To put your quilt sandwich together, you're going to need batting, and that's what I'm talking about today. Welcome to Epida Studio. My name is Elizabeth, and I help you make beautiful things with quilting, pojagi, and embroidery. So once your quilt top is completed, it's going to be time to put it into your quilt sandwich and then hold those layers together. And in these next videos, I'm going to step you right through that process. So the first thing that you're going to need for that is you're going to need batting. And this is the filling in the sandwich. This is the stuff on the inside of the quilt that you don't see once your quilt is quilted. This is on the inside. But it does have a big impact on how your quilt will act and in how you have to do the quilting. So I'm just going to give you some basic things to think about when you're choosing what batting to use. So if you go into a quilt store, you might be overwhelmed because there's so many different options. And you might be wondering, what's the best? I want to use the best. Or you might be thinking, what's the cheapest? I need to use the cheapest. And you need to realize that in terms of what's the best, it depends on your goals for the project. It's not necessarily the most expensive option. So in a quilt store, you will probably find a lot of specialty battings. And these are battings with special properties. And so one that you might see is wool batting. And a lot of people swear by wool batting. They say it's really warm in the winter, it's cool in the summer, it's easy to work with. And so wool batting, it can be really nice, but it is going to be more expensive. And it's not necessarily better to work with than another more economical batting. Also, along with wool, you can get bamboo batting, you can get silk batting. So a lot of those specialty things, they have special characteristics that are good to work with, but I don't recommend that for your first project because you can get less expensive options that are still easy to work with, that will still give you a great product. And when you're just getting into a hobby, there's no reason to go and buy the high-end, top-of-the-line supplies. That's something that you can work up to when you're actually able to appreciate the characteristics and understand why you might even want to use that batting. So then you'll notice a lot of other batting is cotton. And there are a lot of people that are cotton snobs that say everything you use must be 100% cotton, your fabric, your thread, your batting. So as you might have noticed when you saw my other video about thread, I'm not a cotton snob who says everything has to be 100% cotton all the time. I'm fine with using polyester thread, and I'm also fine with using polyester batting. The one that I use the majority of the time is a polyester cotton blend, and it's called 80-20. So it's 80% cotton and 20% polyester. And adding the polyester into the cotton batting, it just helps it with the wear and tear and helps it in how you can quilt it. Now you can also get 100% polyester batting, and oftentimes this batting is more fluffy and thick and squishy. And so some people, they want to get that because they really like having a squishy feeling. Cotton batting tends to be more flat, and some people want it to be a bit squishy. So if that's something that's important to you, you can look for polyester batting. However, don't look for the polyester batting that is like 1 inch or 2 inches thick, because that's going to be very difficult to work with, and that's just for a different type of project. Look for batting that is actually made for quilts and is maybe 1/2 inch thick, just because that will be a lot easier to work with. Now, when you're in a store, you'll notice that some batting comes in little packages and other comes on the roll, and you would buy it by the yard. So it doesn't really matter which way you buy it, if it comes in a bag or you buy it by the yard off the roll. Just be sure that it's the batting that you want and that you get the right size. If you get something in a package, then often they come in like twin, queen, king, like the standard bed sizes. And so those might be too big for what you're doing, but that's okay. You can always just cut off the piece that you need, and then you'll hopefully have a piece of batting that's big enough for your next project. So when you're looking at packages, then just read the label to be sure to see what it is, and read all the words carefully. So we can see this one is cotton batting. So that's pretty good if you want cotton batting, and here's the size of it. But this one is actually fusible. So that means a couple things. It's going to be more expensive. And for this project, fusible, it's not really going to matter. Fusible means it has kind of glue on it, so it will actually kind of help to stick the layers together so that when you go on to your next step of stitching them together, it will hold everything really securely. And this can be a great choice if you want to do intricate free motion quilting, but you're not there yet. So fusible, if you end up getting fusible, then for sure you can use it, but I wouldn't go out of my way looking for fusible at this point. So if you have specific questions about batting, if you're in a quilt store, ask the workers there what kind of batting is good for a beginner. But if they're just pushing you towards the most expensive option that they have, don't feel like you have to go with that. There's nothing wrong with using polycotton batting. Also, most batting, you'll notice, is either like an off-white natural color or it is white. And that is fine for the majority of quilts. If you have a quilt that is very, very dark, you can get black batting. And that can be helpful because sometimes when you're stitching, you can see tiny bits of the batting. However, the batting is on the inside. Usually you won't notice it. And so, yeah, the majority of what I use is a natural color. If I had a quilt that had a lot of white fabric, it's very light, then I might consider a white batting. But the color is mostly irrelevant. So once you've decided what type of batting, what size do you need? So for this case, you're going to take your quilt top that you have and lay it out somewhere flat so that you can measure it. And in a perfect world, if everything worked out, if it is 5 blocks across, then that is going to be 45.5 inches. And if it's 7 blocks down, that's going to be 63.5 inches. And yours is probably going to be pretty close to that. If you did 6 by 6, it's going to be 54.5 inches square. But that is not the size batting you want. You want your batting to be bigger than that. And you want to add at least 6 inches. And so for this 45.5 inches, I'm going to want to add at least 6 inches. So at least 51 or 52 inches is how wide I want my batting to be. And that will just make it a lot easier when you get to the step where you're sewing the layers together. So keep that in mind when you're thinking of how much you need. You need to add at least 6 inches to the width and 6 inches to the length so that you'll have 3 inches more on all the sides. And if you add 4 inches on each side, that's even better. There's no need to go and add like 10 inches on each side. That becomes a bit of overkill, but just a bit so that when you are stitching the layers together, you will have something more to work with. And I'm going to talk about that in more detail in the future lessons. So like always, if you have any questions about batting, drop your questions in the comments and I can try and help you out. Or if you're at a local quilt shop that has a bunch of different kinds of batting, then feel free to ask the staff what they would recommend for you. For more quilting tutorials and inspiration, check out my website, epidastudio.com.